Most people think a Mediterranean cruise is just like any other cruise with some more interesting ports. It's not. The rules are completely different. I've seen way too many cruisers make some big mistakes that waste all of their time, cost them a lot of extra money, and keep them from seeing the very sights they came for. I've been to all the major Mediterranean cruise ports on many different ships, and I'm going to show you exactly how to avoid making the 9 biggest mistakes cruisers make in the Mediterranean so that you can make your Mediterranean cruise your best one yet. I'm Gary with Optimal Cruising, bringing you fresh cruise advice, money-saving hacks, and secret strategies the cruise lines don't advertise. I have a good friend who took her very first trip to Europe last year, and she booked a cruise to see the most important cities. And she had planned everything out for each port of call and figuring she'd have no problem getting on and off the ship at each spot. Well, she couldn't have been more wrong. And a lot of cruisers don't realize that some of the big attractions in Mediterranean cruises are actually tender ports. And you have to plan ahead for that. Because if you don't get an early tender off of the boat, you could be waiting a long time. Santorini is a big one for this because some days when it's busy, they'll have up to 5 cruise ships just anchored offshore. And they'll have a limited number of tender boats bringing these passengers to and from the actual dock. Now, for a lot of people, Santorini is a must-see stop on a Mediterranean cruise, but if you don't get in line and get an early tender ticket and you get off that ship late, not only are you getting a late start, but now you have to wait in huge lines that could be an hour or more just to take the cable car up the cliff because it's the only way from the port where the tender boats dock to get into town. Another popular port in the Mediterranean where this happens is on the Amalfi coast of Italy. So if you're planning to visit one of these hot spots on your Mediterranean cruise and you're not going to book a shore excursion with the cruise line, you need to try to get off that ship early to maximize your time. The way to do this is to check your program on your cruise line the day before that port to see how they're handling tender tickets. Usually there's a time when they give these out the day before, so get there early, get in line, and get the earliest possible tender off that boat. It'll save you a headache, it'll save you time, and it'll help you avoid the crowds. Because there's one thing you might consider doing on a typical Caribbean cruise that you'll never want to do on a Mediterranean cruise. Sometimes I'll go on a Caribbean cruise just for the ship. I want to explore the Star of the Seas or the MSC World America, and I might not even get off at some of the ports. But in the Mediterranean, cruises are not about the ship. They're much more about the ports. I've had passengers tell me on multiple cruises that they stayed out late, partied a little bit, had a few more drinks that night, and the next morning they just weren't feeling like getting off the ship, so they just slept in and skipped that port. But in the Mediterranean, you don't really want to do that. You'll be missing key experiences. Now, this doesn't mean that you should book a shore excursion for every port, because a lot of these ports can easily be done on your own, and you'll probably have more fun that way. Depending on your tolerance or how much sleep you need, you're going to want to pace yourself a little more on Mediterranean cruises because you're going to have earlier days and longer days to get in all the sightseeing that you're going to want to do. But cruisers who make this next mistake get completely disappointed even after they get off the ship. On my very first Mediterranean cruise, I had a major fail. I started looking at booking tickets for things that I wanted to see in Rome about a month before my cruise departed. Couldn't get into the Vatican, couldn't even get tickets to the Roman Colosseum. These things in Europe book up months in advance. As soon as you book that cruise, you need to start thinking about what sites you want to see. If your ship's going to Civitavecchia or Rome and you want to go to the Vatican, Buy those tickets immediately. They will sell out. You cannot get off the ship and walk in and expect to get a ticket. They won't have any. The Colosseum books up well in advance. If you're going to Florence and you want to see the Uffizi Museum, Barcelona is another one. If you're trying to get into the Sagrada Familia, you won't be able to unless you get those tickets well in advance. So for any of these major attractions in big European cities that your cruise ship is going to, start buying those tickets online as soon as you book that cruise to secure them. For some of these sites, if you don't book them at least 6 months in advance, you won't get in. And that's a major disappointment for people taking a Mediterranean cruise because that's what you're going for. If you've ever been on a Mediterranean cruise, let me know if you had any trouble getting into a certain museum or site. Put it in the comments below. Not too long ago, I went on a Mediterranean cruise with a friend of mine, and we left from Barcelona, and one of the stops was Rome. And this was his first Mediterranean cruise. And when we got to Civitavecchia, he's like, "What's Civitavecchia? Where's Rome?" You have to be very careful when you're booking a Mediterranean cruise and understand exactly where the ship is docking, not where the cruise line is advertising that you're going, because sometimes it's quite misleading. For example, most Mediterranean itineraries will include cities like Florence and Rome, but both of these cities are an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on traffic, away from the cruise port where the ship actually docks. So if you're going to Rome for 8 or 9 hours, you're going to lose at least 3 hours in travel getting there and back. And it could be as much as 4, which means instead of having 8 or 9 hours, you really only have 4 or 5. And then there's the added cost. So if you price out shore excursions for some of these Mediterranean cruise ports, you'll see that they're exceedingly expensive, even on independent bookings. I have some links to some independent providers like Viator and Shore Excursions Group. They will offer lower prices than the cruise line, but it's still not cheap. And what a lot of people do is they do these cities on their own. So for example, last time I was on a cruise that stopped in Civitavecchia, which is the cruise port for Rome. I got on the train. It's fairly easy to do. There is a bus that will take you from the terminal to the train station, and there are taxis that'll charge you about €5 a person, so it's not expensive. And then once you get to the train, it's about 15 to 20 euros round trip to get to and from Rome. That's cheap compared to if you buy a transfer, it's going to cost you about $200. The same thing can be done in Florence and other cities that are not located exactly where the ship docks. But understanding this ahead of time can help you plan that out. So you know where you're going, how you're going to get there. And then once you're there, you're free to explore the city on your own, because Europe is great when it comes to trains, and there's always a train from the cruise stop to the major city, and then from where that train stops in the major city, it's usually right in the middle of everything, so it's easy to walk around and explore and go to the sites that you want to see on foot. The problem comes in if you don't really think about this ahead of time. You either get roped into booking a very expensive excursion in order just to get you to the city and back, or you lose a lot of time trying to figure out how to get to and from the train station. But this information is readily available online. You look on Google Maps. I actually have another video which shows you exactly how to navigate some of these Mediterranean cruise ports. I have learned the hard way that August is a month where a lot of Europeans go on vacation. In fact, all of Italy considers the month of August basically a holiday, and they're off work and they're visiting some of these hotspots that your cruise is going to go to. In fact, many of the Mediterranean cruise ports are in Italian cities. The crowds are excessive in August and the heat is excessive in August. If you want to go in the summer, which is a very popular time, you're going to get more crowds, but August is the worst month to cruise. If you can cruise in October, or if you can go in May or early June, You're going to have less crowds and a lot more milder weather, so it's a little bit more tolerable. Europe and the Mediterranean gets very hot in the middle of summer, so you're going to be dealing with that heat in addition to a lot of extra walking that many Americans are not used to doing on a daily basis. And while you're dressing for all this heat, you've got to be careful of one mistake that gets people turned away from the very sights they want to see. The first time I went to Rome, I had no idea that there was a certain dress code in place. My wife had to tell me this, and thank goodness she did. Otherwise, I would have been denied entry into one of the sites we bought tickets for. And this is because in many religious sites and also some museums throughout Italy and the Mediterranean, there is a dress code, and people get off these cruise ships and it can be hot out, especially if you're cruising in the summer and you're dressing for the weather. Men are wearing shorts, women are wearing tank tops and shorts, and all of those things will get you denied entry into most religious sites and some museums. So if you're planning on going to the Vatican, you have to have clothing that covers both the knees and the shoulders. If they're not covered, they won't let you in. But this doesn't mean you have to walk around all day in pants and sleeved shirts. You can wear what's comfortable for you. Just bring something in a backpack that you can put over your shoulders, or at least make sure your knees are covered so that you can get into these sites without a problem. Now, I had a friend who actually made this next mistake, and it cost him hundreds of dollars. So a friend of mine did his first Mediterranean cruise last year. It was a 10-day cruise and his first time in Europe. And he wasn't familiar with the currency or really anything. So the first thing he did was went to the ATM there to draw out some euros so that he'd have some spending cash. And it's actually a great idea because there are a lot of street vendors and sellers selling decent products in some of these cities. And if you're paying with cash, you're going to get a much better deal than if you're trying to pay with credit card. So what caught my friend off guard was when he went to take out 500 euros from an ATM. The machine asked him, "Would you like me to take this out in dollars?" And he thought, well, yeah, he's familiar with dollars, and dollars is the currency in his bank account back home, so he just said yes. He thought the machine was doing him a favor and taking out the equivalent amount of those 500 euros in dollars from his bank account. But that is not what's happening. These machines are not your friend. In fact, they're asking you if they can charge you more for that cash because they do a dynamic conversion. They convert the euros to dollars at a much higher rate than your bank back home would, and they take that as a commission. So if you allow the machine to convert that transaction to dollars for you, you're going to pay a whole lot more than you would if you just take the money out in euros and let your bank back home convert it. It'll be a much more favorable rate. So my friend continued this policy throughout his 10-day cruise. If he needed more cash or when he was buying food at a restaurant, he would pay with a credit card, and it would always ask him the same thing. Did he want to pay in euros or dollars? The easiest way to not make this mistake is to always pay in the local currency. If the ATM or the credit card machine is asking you to convert that to dollars, always choose no. Pay in the local currency and you'll get a much more favorable exchange rate, and you could save hundreds of dollars over your entire cruise doing this. Now, if you're trying to figure out which Mediterranean cruise should I book, we actually maintain a list of the best cruise deals you can book right now. If you'd like a copy, just comment deals or click on the deals link in our description and I'll email it to you. One of the biggest mistakes that some cruisers in the Mediterranean make is ignoring local port laws, because you're visiting a vast array of different countries with different laws, rules, and regulations. Some of the strange ones that get people are, for example, in Barcelona, if you're going to walk along any of the beaches, and there are some beaches right there by the port, It's illegal to vape or smoke, and you can be fined up to 2,000 euros if you get caught. Now, who would think this because you're out in an open outdoor space, but that's the law there. There are certain regions in Italy that have declared themselves completely smoke-free, from cigarettes, vapes, anything. And one of those is Sardinia. So if your cruise ship is stopping there, keep that in mind. If you're stopping in Egypt and you use e-cigarettes, leave them on the ship. There's been a huge crackdown on these, and you don't want to be getting into trouble with authorities in a foreign country. Another odd law that catches people off guard is that if you're visiting Greece, you're going to find a lot of street vendors, and some of them are selling imitation designer goods, which is not only illegal for them to sell, but if you buy it, you could also be fined because it's illegal to buy fake designer goods in Greece. If you're going to a country and you're not sure about something, it's easy to Google what the law is regarding it before you get off the ship. Now, avoiding this next mistake could help you avoid having a major accident. But first, if you've enjoyed this video so far, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. It helps us grow and we'll continue bringing you cruising updates. I'm an American and I'm used to going into a restaurant and getting a glass of ice water just automatically brought to the table. And when I'm out and about anywhere, I'm used to being able to duck into a public restroom at pretty much any town or any city. In fact, any grocery store I walk in will have a restroom that I can go use if I need it. Unfortunately, Europe is nothing like this. So you need to set the right expectations because when you're on a Mediterranean cruise, you're going to want to try the local cuisine at least a few times during your cruise. And when you do, if you're expecting to get water, you're going to have to pay for it. It's not free. They do not give out free tap water. They don't really even give you ice. What you're going to get is bottled water. And you're going to have two choices, still or sparkling, and they have it everywhere. But it's the norm in Europe that people pay for this at restaurants. Sometimes what I do, and no restaurant has ever had a problem with it, is I just bring water in my tumbler because I don't like having to pay 4 euros for a bottle of water somewhere when I can get it for free from the ship. And I just bring that during my day and I'm good to go. And then there is a bathroom problem all over Europe. In fact, there are literally no free bathrooms unless you're eating at a restaurant. Sometimes the restaurants will provide a bathroom for customers. In fact, that's actually quite common in these tourist cities. However, if you're just out about sightseeing, you're not going to come upon too many public restrooms. And restaurants are going to be strict. They're not going to let you walk in there and use their bathroom without being a customer. But you will find areas near museums and other tourist hotspots where they have paid bathrooms. So it's important to carry some loose change with you because some of these bathrooms these days are accepting credit cards, and you can use Apple Pay and things like that to get in. They usually have a gate that lets you in. It's rather interesting. But some of them that aren't manned by people, they will just have a slot for a coin, and you have to either put €1 in or 50 cents in, or sometimes as much as 150. When you need the bathroom, you need the bathroom. So carry some loose change in case you get up against a bathroom that you have to put in €1 to get inside so that you can use it. And what my wife and I try to do is we kind of make sure that when we're going to stop at a cafe or a restaurant, we ask, do you have a bathroom? And then we're going to use that bathroom and take advantage of it before we leave that place. So hopefully we don't get stuck and have to try to find a bathroom in the city and then have to pay for it on top of that. Now, if you are planning a Mediterranean cruise and you have any questions about one of the ports of call on your itinerary, let me know in the comments below. I'll do my best to get right back to you. So now that you'll have an incredible Mediterranean cruise by avoiding some of the biggest mistakes, there are some cruisers who are booking the wrong ship in the Mediterranean. I'll tell you how to avoid that right here.